Here we got our next piece is going to be the axle peg. As you see here, holds the wheel to the train body. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've got over on this side our dimensions that we need. So a couple things. When I first look at this, I'm seeing kind of a cylinder. It's got some threading on it. It's got the head of that screw, I guess you could say. It's got the hex shape. And so generally you could revolve this. I'm going to split this into two parts just because of where the location of it. So I'll make a cylinder first with the chamfer on the end, and then I'll revolve the head of it. Okay, a couple other things while we're looking here. First off, notes on the screwing here. Okay, so what I'm noticing is I got a 1/4 inch, so that's your diameter. The 20 UNC is talking about 20 threads per inch times 1. This is 1 inch in length. 1/4 inch offset is saying the thread starts a 1/4 inch into the screw here. Okay, and meanwhile on the hex socket, so that's a hex shape hole. We'll have 5/32 across the flat, so that's going to be the length across here, and it's 0.111 deep. The other dimensions we've seen before. Let's get started. All right, so I'm going to model this in place like we've been doing before. So my first thought here, I'm going to sketch right on this face, just because I know the screw is going to land up on this face of the wheel. So with that sketch, the first thing, I'm going to just do the cylindrical part. So if I kind of hover over here, sorry about that. If I hover over here, I'm going to find that center point. Notice it turns into a square. I'll click on that. And then right now I'm just going to size it kind of randomly because I'm going to have to add a dimension to it. That dimension, as I see right here, is a 1/4 inch, right? So dimension 0.25, hit enter. Hit the check mark, and this is what we're going to extrude first. So I'm going to hit this value. It's going the wrong way right now. Hit opposite direction. Remember from this it said it's 1 inch, so it's ready set to 1 inch. We are looking good, and it is a new part. Okay, hit check. All right, so this is going to be the bottom portion of that axle peg. I want to add the chamfer as well as the threading. So to do that, I'm going to hide a couple things. First, I'm going to hide this left front wheel. Also going to hide the train body so I can see the entire thing. All right, chamfer, remember, means adding that little sloped edge. Hit chamfer. In this case, it is 45 degrees times 0.03. 45 degrees, 0.03. Already typed that in from earlier. So hit that edge. Now this edge has got a little slope to it. Hit the check. Next up, I want to add some threading. So if I type in external thread, this is what I'm going to search for. Here it shows up here. Okay, so external thread, and the way it works for Onshape is it doesn't actually create the threads. It's just more for notation. So when you put your drawings together, it'll be set up there. In addition, you'll see the if you did want to actually create threads, there is a plugin for that I've used before, but or you can create it separately. But in this case, we're just going to use it as a note. Okay, so cylinder edge, I'm going to choose the edge of that. It's set up to ANSI, 1/4 inch, and 20 threads per inch. And remember, it's 0.75. Remember on the notes here, it said 1/4 inch offset, so the 1/4 inch is shown on that side. Okay, hit the check mark. And again, this is really just more for showing that it will be threaded, or you could thread it after the fact. All right, I'll go ahead and unhide the body and the wheel now. All right, next up, we got to add the kind of the head of our axle peg. So to do that, I'm going to create a new plane. I want this plane to be right in the middle of this. That way it can draw that shape. Okay, so I'm going to do an offset plane from the bottom. Right now, I see that it's being drawn to the other side, so I want this up, and I want to line it up here. If you did the math or you kind of check the notes, I know that the center of that hole is 0.5 inches above. I can hit enter to see where it shows up. And right now, I can see if I click here on the right side view, it's right on the middle of that circle. So that's what I want to use. Okay, next up, I'm going to sketch on that plane I just created. Right now, if I rotate up to the top, maybe I'll do it this way just so we can kind of look at it the same shape as what we saw earlier. Okay, so now, I want to add the face to here. Okay, so first off, I'm going to use the existing geometry. So project it using that tool there, and that creates that line. I'm going to use that to find the middle of this circle. Okay, so again, I'm creating a point, hovering over it, see that square, and now I know that that's the center of the circle. All right, I'll come back to looking at it from the top. Again, you can rotate it around if you so choose. And we're going to create the shape of the top portion. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a line that goes from the top here. And again, I notice that the top portion here is flat for the axle peg. And in addition, I also know that this line is actually goes a little bit longer. So I'm going to recreate that one. And then it comes up a little bit. And then the last portion is a little bit of an arc. So I'll use a 3-point arc, click on 2 edges, drag it to approximately, I'm going to make it kind of a random shape without it being locked to anything right now. Right, so kind of like that. Okay, so that's one thing with Onshape. It tries to be really smart and predict what constraints you want. Helpful sometimes, not as helpful sometimes, if depending on what the shape you're trying to create. All right, so the couple things, I'm noticing that there's got some diameters here, right? So I am going to add an additional line. I'm going to make that a construction line that comes across the top here. And oftentimes I'll use construction lines to help me with diameter. So now when I go to dimension this, right? So for example, from this edge to the construction line, if I just hold it this way, it'll measure the distance between the two. If I pull it to the other side, it'll turn into a diameter. And in this case, that diameter was this number here, 0.422. 0.422. Hit enter. All right, and then same thing for this inner circle. That one was 0.25, and it is flat. Okay, so from here to here, and drag it to the side, 0.25. Now I've got that value. I also need to keep track of these heights. 0.031 is from here to here, 0.031. And the height overall is 0.125. I'm seeing that right there. Here, oops, try that again. Dimension from here to here, 0.125. All right, the last thing is the arc of this portion. I'm seeing a radius of 0.236. So let's go ahead and add that one as well, 0.236. And I see everything turned to a black color, meaning it's all constrained. We're good to go. Hit the check mark. All right, and then finally, this is a good spot for a revolve. So the face I'm going to choose is sketch 18. Revolve axis is the middle that's going to rotate around. All right, and notice it's a different color than the bottom because right now it's set to a new part. I want to add that. The merge scope is going to be adding it to that bottom peg. Now it's all one orange color. Hit the check. Okay, the last thing we need to do here is add this little hexagon shape. So I'm going to look it back to the right side view. I'm going to sketch on the top of this peg. And there's a little option here that says inscribe polygon or circumscribe polygon. If you're basing it based on the size of the circle, then you need to choose the according one. The way we're going to do it, though, is going to be based on the size of the lengths. So you could choose either one. All right, so I'm going to make sure I select the center of that circle, start pulling it out, and I'm just going to click. Notice that this number 6 showed up in the bottom. If I move it, it'll change the number of sides, but 6 is what we want, so I'll just click again. And we've got our hexagon shape. Personally, I like to make these horizontal to each other, so it just looks a little bit neater. And then finally, we got to add that dimension. Right, if we saw earlier, it was 5/32. So that's from here to here. And you can either figure out what that is in decimals or just type it in 5/32. Creates that size. Hit the check mark. Almost done here. We're going to insert the depth of it, 0.111 deep. So that's going to be an extrude. I'm going to choose that shape. We want it to remove, and we want it to remove that blind 0.111. Hit the check. We've got our axle peg. I'm going to do a couple things just to stay organized, like we've been doing. Select all those things that we just did. Right click, add selection to folder. This was the axle peg. Check mark. Rename the part. Axle peg. Enter. And we've got it locked in there. All right, and just like we did before with the wheels, if you wanted to, you can put all those parts here. It's really not necessary. I typically would do this in the assembly, but now that I mentioned it, I'll go ahead and do it real quick. So linear pattern, this is going to be a part pattern. Entity is that axle peg that we just made. Direction, have it follow any line along here. I'm seeing it's going to the left. I want it to go the other way, to the right. And then the distance between them, distance between them was, I believe, 3.5. And there it gets locked in. Check. And then if you want to, you can also have those two parts, axle pegs. We can mirror it to the other side. Mirror plane is going to be the right plane that, for me, cuts it in half. Now I've got it on both sides. Check mark again. And then if you wanted to, you can bring those into the axle peg folder. All right. Again, you could rename them. I won't waste your time showing that in the video.